Niranjan, was civics your favorite subject in school?
It was definitely one of my favorites, and I think I was definitely an odd one out in my class because all my friends certainly did not like it, but I enjoyed it. I think history was my preferred one, but for the longest time, we used to have. I was in CBSE, so we used to have social studies. So within that, there'd be civics, history,
Yeah, yeah.
geography. But yeah, I think history and civics I really enjoyed because I used to like reading the newspaper. So I used to follow politics and what's happening. Uh, but yeah, I think is generally at least it is uncommon in my class for people to care about civics. It's be like, why are we studying this? But I just find it very
And
fascinating.
these are the subjects you couldn't score 100 marks in.
That's also true.
Yeah.
Yeah, unlike maths or Sanskrit. Yeah.
Okay. And Khushali, who is an intersectional feminist?
I think it's basically a way of seeing how a person's different identities shape their privilege and existence in the world. So, for example, and it comes in use in a lot of policy contexts and in the way that certain things affect us. So, for example, how do caste, class, gender, disability kind of affect one's experience of the world rather than just being a woman, being a woman of color or a woman of color who's in a wheelchair? How does your how does your identity in that way affect how policy affects you, or how design affects you? And I think it's a useful lens through which to build empathy towards other groups of people around you. And so that's why, yeah, I,
Okay,
I believe in like an intersectional lens on how to see the world. Yeah.
great. Thank you, Khushali. Welcome to the My First Job podcast. This is our monthly youth panel where we talk to young people who are looking about their career ahead. And we have Niranjan, who is who has graduated from the Symbiosis School for Liberal Arts, then worked at the National Center for Advocacy Studies, an NGO in Pune, for 2 years. And he focused on marginalized groups. He went on to do his master's in governance and public policy from the Institute of Development Studies at the University of Essex. He has worked as a researcher for the last 5 years, and he tutors master level students studying governance and development. He researches political polarization and social movements, heavy subjects. So, for someone so young, it's a great way to understand what a career in this field means. Niranjan, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great to have you on the show. And now let me introduce Khushali. Khushali, as she just explained, is an intersectional feminist. She's worked in public health, food, security, and environmental activism in the UK and India. She has a degree in economics from the Queen Mary University of London. She has worked with a public health NGO based in the UK that creates mass media campaigns on preventable disease, nutrition, sexual and reproductive health, and mental health for countries in Africa. She now works as a trust and grants manager, interacting with the entire food chain from farms and manufacturers to redirect surplus food to those who need it the most. Two young people looking at some of the world's most intractable problems. What got you guys started? Niranjan?
Uh, to be honest, I think when I was like 9 years old or something, I watched in retrospect a very terrible Bollywood movie, which really it's called Nayak, and it's just about this person who becomes like a chief minister for a day and
Right.
solves all of the world's problems. And I was like, yes, like I want to kind of do something of that sort where I can help
Okay.
change things. But I think over the course of like the next 10, 15 years, I kept looking out for things I could do to kind of improve the world around me and society generally. And yeah, I ended up doing research where I felt like if I could do research on public policy and development, I could maybe have a positive impact uh, just on the people around me. Yeah.
Okay. Kushali, what got you started?
I think it was quite, I wish it was a movie, but I think it was more in the home that it started. Like, I think as a young woman, I grew up in Bombay, and just you get a bit angry at the way certain things are in the household itself. Like, why is my brother being treated in a certain way and I'm not? And so just like anger at some of these things got me started about trying to like think about why men and women are treated differently. And then I graduated in economics, and I loved it, and I worked in economics in the central bank, and that was great. But I really felt like I was wanting to do something that had more of a personal impact in the world, um, and where you could make change happen. Um, and I was surrounded by people who were doing really inspiring work, like friends who were really doing inspiring work. There was a humanitarian crisis in the UK. People were kind of dying in the sea, coming, trying to get to the UK when they were fleeing war in their own countries. And that was very much happening when I was a teenager in this country. So it was really hard to look away from that and still justify working in a bank where you're so removed from some of these things. So yeah, that's kind of what got me into this world.
Okay. So, having got into it, you've now spent a few years, which is about 5 to 6 years. And the point at which you're saying, I want to be responsible for change versus actually being able to, it's a long road in terms of whatever it is that you're trying to do. So, where exactly do you begin, Niranjan?
No, you're spot on. Like, there's like, I think when I entered this field, the idea was that you can directly cause a lot of change. You can see the impact on the ground, and you know, maybe I imagine it to be easier than it would be, uh, especially in a field like research, where the idea is that you produce knowledge products which are very useful to those who can do something with that knowledge to maybe change policy, or maybe change the way a particular NGO has runs a program on social protection, for example. And you're relying on quality research influencing those in power to then go about successfully change certain things. And you don't often get to see the impact on the ground itself, which, I mean, when I was working with the NGO in Pune in India, National Center for Advocacy Studies, there I would often go to villages around and neighboring districts where I would kind of directly work with different households, trying to improve access to the PDS system, which is the ration that
Right.
you could get. So, and there, when I was working there, I could, like, within a few months, I could see change happen. For an example, as an example, there was this accountability thing that we did where we worked on improving the awareness about rights that people had. And this particular village I'm speaking about, they basically are filled with different tribal communities. I mean, they would be classified as STs, and they stayed in villages which are kind of on like different hills, slightly remote to from where the actual ration shop would be located. And in the process of trying to like work on awareness, we realized that the government mandated that if you stayed really far from the ration shop, then it was ration shop owner's responsibility to kind of send a truck there and actually distribute the ration. So once we kind of communicated this, the people over there mobilized, and they could actually get, they could demand basically their right. And there was change and there was impact on the ground. A few months later, there were actual trucks being sent to these different villages, which are, a slight distance away, and they would actually have access to the ration in a more comfortable manner, especially for those who are, elderly, or they are
Right.
less able, but they're disabled in some way. So at that point, I could see the impact and the change. But now that I am in the UK and I'm primarily focusing on research, the impact is, it feels way more distant and it's not always visible. So there's a bit of a trade-off in terms of, I feel like I'm doing something more at scale in terms of I'm working in lots of different big INGOs and government authorities in different countries, but I don't really get to see the change
What
happen.
is happening on the ground?
Yeah, myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. I think that perspective is very important. So, Khushali, what has your experience been? Because you've gone through several
Hmm.
kinds of jobs as well.
So is the question, how do you know where to start in terms of
Yeah. In
wanting to?
your experience, what
Hmm.
do you think has brought about some change that you could see?
Hmm.
Or you said that it's not a question of getting into the field as much as saying, okay, what can I do? And it's an internal journey as well.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Yeah, I think I really resonate with what Niranjan said, that perhaps the most fulfilling side of this career is firsthand seeing the change. So I was recently working at a public arts collective in India called Fearless Collective. They're a really inspiring organization, and they create large scale murals on the streets around the world with environmental activists and movement leaders, because as kind of like a counterforce, a creative counterforce to big ads and political campaigning that you usually see on the streets. And the idea was that when you are painting this mural, the individuals who pass by on the street as you are painting something about trans women in Jaipur, or about politics happening in the world, that you can use art as this tool to really engage anybody in a difficult conversation. And for me, that like individual one-on-one changing of someone's mind or understanding where they're coming from on a certain perspective is a really fulfilling kind of change that you can see in the world, and that happened many times in that role at Fearless Collective. But I think that often you want to see impact on a large scale, and scaling these kind of moments of change is the hard part in this kind of role. And in that sense, what I have learned is that you have to have some skin in the game, like some level of self interest. And I've read this and I've kind of heard this from other colleagues in the sector, is that to choose something that doesn't burn you out, because everybody comes into this sector with like a lot of wanting to do good and whatnot, and you can kind of get swept up in it, and you don't know where to draw the boundary sometimes, or you end up being drawn into things that you didn't think you cared about or wanted to go into. So I think that in order for this to be a sustainable career choice, you have to be working and make choices that allow you to work in something that you deeply care about and you have some sort of self-interest in, because otherwise you're going to get completely burnt out. And that self-interest can include, well, if I'm working on the ground, if I'm working closest to where the impact is seen, is that paying me enough to, pay the bills at
Right,
home?
right,
So
right.
that also is a trade-off, and self-interest can sometimes look like prioritizing, your sustainability while seeing the impact that's most possible with that kind of role. Um, and what's going to keep you going in the long run is a cause that deeply sits inside your very core.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So let me take you to another aspect of bringing about change, which is visibility. A few days ago, I just looked at the top 100 channels on YouTube just to see, okay, what is
Hmm.
it that drives interest in people? And it was absolutely escapist fare from 1 to 100. So you have skilled, advertising and PR and government efforts, which are focused on driving brands. I can be accused of being exactly in that because I'm in advertising. But there's a whole set of work which is being done just to ensure that you get attention. So this comes at the fag end of something that people really don't want to see. It's like the underbelly that is best hidden. How do you counter something like that? What are the ways in which you look at driving interest, or I don't know how to, I don't know if I framed the question right, but what do you think, Niranjan?
That's a very good question, and I mean the way I understood your question is that there, yeah, I think you're spot on. No one, even myself included, there's only so much of the bad news of the world that I can take,
Hmm.
that after a while I'm like, okay, maybe I don't, I want to kind of stay away from my phone just because I know that I'm going to be exposed to a lot of this. And there's also a feeling of helplessness that comes, at least at a personal level, where I'm not able to, like, there's not a lot you can do about some things, but they are undesirable from my perspective, from my worldview at least. So pushing for change in a world where there's a lot of investment going into micro targeting of ads to for people to buy stuff and maybe escape some of their other dilemmas. Yes, it's really hard, and I don't, like, there would be certain NGOs or certain social enterprises that work on specifically narrative forms of change using stories. And I think Khushali could really like answer this better than me because she has worked there. But there are certain groups that work on storytelling to let people into a world and be comfortable knowing about something that's happening and discussing that and maybe having a difficult conversation. So yeah, it's not, I don't think it's an easy, it's in this world where there's already a lot of awareness about what's going wrong. A lot of people do want, and myself included, don't necessarily want to constantly engage with that. And there's this escapist reality, and there's also the reality of a lot of investment going into this kind of an attention economy, trying to ensure that what does grab attention is maybe a product that we could buy, retail therapy or something,
Yeah,
as opposed to, okay,
yeah,
what kind of change we might actually want for the world. So yeah, basically it is hard to maybe get the reality of this sort, for people to like kind of engage with. And I'm not sure how social
yeah.
enterprises do, but
No, it's a
Kushal, do you
it's a
want to? Yeah.
fundamental problem. I agree. I'm just saying that since you work in it, is this something that you confront, or you say that my job is to put the message out there, and then how it's taken and what happens as a result is not within my control. So, what do you think, Kushali?
Oh no, it's a constant. I mean, nobody wants to do work where it's not seen, right? So it's a constant struggle. And yeah, I have worked in loads of storytelling organizations, and actually, my old boss at Fearless and the founder of Fearless often says, like, people like politicians kind of take over our streets with huge propaganda posters. These shops, like any brands, will take over huge billboards on our streets, but nobody asked for permission from us to kind of, this is public space. We didn't want to see these things, but we were never asked what we want to see. And so our job in the sector really is to kind of, they didn't ask permission from us, so we don't need to ask permission from them to kind of take back that that attention, that narrative of what we actually want to see. And storytelling is one of the most impactful ways of doing that. So, some other work that I found really inspiring and that really does this well is these public health campaigns that are on like mass media channels like radio and TV. So, in India, I know that Breakthrough, I don't know if you've come across their ads, but they do like jingles and songs and really using the same techniques that engage this kind of distraction, like attention economy, using the same tools to talk about a difficult message. Like Breakthrough had this campaign called Ghanti Bajao, and it was really entertaining, but it was about domestic violence. And it was like really caught your attention, and they did it so well. And my old work, they used to do TV and radio kind of 1 minute segments between like football games, and they would pay high prices to get that slot in the middle of a really intense football final to talk about like malaria, and they use local actors, they use local proverbs and storylines to get people's attention. And so I think sometimes you kind of have to use those same attention economy tools to get this message, and I found that to be quite impactful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I think you have got around to what those things are. I'll I'm talking to Khushali and Niranjan. This is the My First Job podcast, and today's is about international development. And they're seeing it from a lens, as Khushali said early on, about how do you provide enough space and visibility for the disadvantaged, for people who are handling problems that we don't even think of on a day to day basis. Because it's all about escapist fare and how people look at, being entertained. But it is, from a point of view of a career, a very interesting way to see the world. And that's what I'll be talking about in the next segment. So if you like what you're hearing, share, like, subscribe, and make sure that people who are interested in doing something in this field get to know what the opportunities are for them. So, Khushali, let me come to you. How do you look at, one of the things uppermost on people's mind is what is the salary like? What kind of jobs can I hope to get? You spoke about this to say that you first need to be financially stable.
Hmm.
So, what is your, response to people who say, how much does this pay?
Oh gosh. It varies on what the role you're doing is. Um, I do think, and Niranjan, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think that the roles that are most grueling, where you're firsthand working with people in the remotest, like the most affected by certain issues, the pay is not so rewarding as it should be. And then the higher up you go, in terms of like, people doing roles like program management or fundraising or finance in the NGO sector, are the ones that are most well paid, and they are the ones who are most likely to be kind of in an office environment, and closer to the pot of money. I really feel like closer to the pot that's dispersing the money for these programs, you earn the most money, and then as you go closer to
It
the where the impact
reduces
is
all the way
felt.
down.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Niranjan, what do
Okay.
you think?
Yeah. What's your take?
No, I do agree. So, for yeah, going back to my example, when I was working in India in Pune, I definitely could see more impact. I mean, to be frank, that position by itself was also not the most front line of front lines, but it still I could see the impact, and it was closer to where things needed to change, or well, what I thought where things need to change. And I was not necessarily getting paid well at all. I was very comfortable, but maybe uh, I don't think my parents would have approved of me having that kind of an income for a long, long time. But as you kind of start kind of getting into some other roles and also in certain organizations, you can. I mean, in India, for example, I know of people who are working within the sector, and they are getting well, like they're getting a good salary, but it depends on what kind of an organization you're with. So if you're with a research organization, or if you're in the consultancy, development consultancy sector, then you can get paid pretty well. But for example, if you're teaching children directly, there might be some fellowships that pay decently, but you are not likely to uh, start off by earning a lot of money. So I think it really does vary from organization, but also within the sector there are different kinds of organizations that are there. There are social enterprises that, you know, you could kind of get paid well if you're part of that, or if you're part of a research group that is internationally known, and there are lots of, like they have a South Asia office in India, then you could get paid well.
Mm.
So it really depends. It's very varied, basically. But yeah, the more global the thing is, or closer you are to maybe the funding part, as Kush was saying, then you could earn quite a bit. I know people who are in the sector with who are earning way more than maybe engineers uh, who have been working for the same number of years. So yeah, my original idea was that in the sector, I have to kind of make do with a very moderate pay, and I have to make peace with not having very luxurious lifestyle. Uh, but I do feel like as opposed to that, engineering is where you make all the money.
Right.
But maybe it also has to do with supply demand of engineers in India. That
Right.
yeah, engineers can get paid poorly because of the number of engineers there. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So now let's get down to what the jobs are really like. And, let me come to Khushali and, the range of roles that you have done. So can you take me through those and tell me what exactly, you started off, you said you started off as an economist and then you moved into a more, social organization kind of role. So
Mm. Yeah.
what
Yeah.
really happened?
Sure. So I think as a newbie in the sector, the easy one of the easier roles to get into is either a role in communications or a role in fundraising, because those have a lot of transferable skills in from other careers, or from college. Like, for example, for fundraising roles, you need a skill set in writing, you need a skill set in kind of desk research, you need good communication skills. This is all stuff that's very transferable from other roles. So personally, for me, I found it a good entry point into this world to do a fundraising role. um, so you can start off with like project design roles, project development officer, or strategy and partnerships officer, where basically your day to day would look like identifying people who can fund you, who are funding your organization, similar organizations. So doing this kind of prospecting research, ki who is funding this kind of public health organization, and then kind of cold emailing them or finding out a strategy, creating a strategy to approach these funders, and then eventually writing a grant application, designing the program with the research teams and other teams in the organization, managing budgets, which is always fun. And then you kind of, as a fundraiser, you kind of then hand over that once you get the funds, hopefully. But it's, yeah, it's, you can never tell. You kind of hand over to the programs team, who then manage the running of that program. So that's what my first role looked like. I loved it, gained a lot of skills, but I really felt kind of unfulfilled in the sense that I didn't want to hand over the money once I had like worked so hard to get it. So then you
Raised it,
kind
yeah.
of, yeah, you kind of have this desire to see how it's going. So I did a more campaigns based role then in India with the Fearless Collective, and that campaigning basically is how can you literally influence change, what levers do you pull to influence change, what communication channels, what tactics. So campaigning role is really fun, it's extremely strategic and very much network based, like how can you pull in certain groups to make sure everyone's interests and outcomes are aligned. So it's a very strategic role. I'm not sure how high up, what the career trajectory for campaigning can look like. Obviously, you can go ahead and do like political campaigning, which is a big kind of side sector in this. Um, yeah, so those are some of the roles like campaigning, communications, fundraising. And right now, at present, I'm a trust and grants fundraiser. So that is a very specific type of fundraising where you raise funds
I'll
from
come back to that, Khushali,
agencies.
because I think that's a very, I'll go into that a little deeper
Hmm.
because that's in food, I think. So that I'd
Yeah,
like to understand that a little better.
sure, sure, sure.
Okay. So, Niranjan, uh, you spoke about being part of a think tank as well as tutoring people. So, what does your day job look like, and what are the various things that you end up doing?
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, I'm a part of a think tank, and 80% of my job is to basically do research, and maybe, yeah, 20% could be engaging with master level students on tutoring them. So with the research component, it's by and large we function almost as a like a consultancy. There are lots of different clients that we have. They could be governments, they could be philanthropic foundations, they could be uh, NGOs who basically want some kind of a knowledge service. And my job primarily is to do a lot of either it'll be research coordination and management. So there'll be research teams who are in maybe they could be in a different country as well, and I will be kind of coordinating the research from the UK, but it'll be primarily around the broader focus of the research is to maybe find the answers to these questions. And we might have research partners in two, three different countries who are actually conducting the research, which will help us answer the question. So there's one research management component to it. There's on the side I could just be individually doing research, which is through desk research. So there's a lot of like I'm very familiar with academic jargon and trying to understand the what's written in a journal article about maybe the political economy of a particular issue, or why some kind of policies are hard to advocate for in a particular society. So I would engage in a lot of desk research where I go through lots of different journal articles and try to synthesize that to arrive at a very comprehensive uh, look into what is the state of knowledge about something. So that'll be the desk research component that I can do maybe by myself without anyone else really engaging in it. And the third thing would be me myself also kind of doing some field work, which is where I might do focus group discussions or engage in different forms of primary data collection essentially. So
Okay.
that could be I could be conducting interviews, I could be doing interviews with people. I mean, now with Teams and Zoom, you can do it. They could be sitting anywhere in the world.
Anyway, in the world, yeah.
So
Virtually
yes,
across.
there's a primary data collection aspect as well. And with the tutoring aspect, it is, yeah, where there are lots of muscle students who come to the University of Sussex, and yeah, IDS. That's where I do engage with teaching. So they'll have the lectures. So I mean, I did not have this in India growing up, and maybe some colleges have that now. But basically, the idea is that you have the lecture in the morning where there'll be someone who's a very senior professor who's delivering the lecture itself, and then after that, the lecture is primarily like unidirectional. It's like lecture kind of sharing the gyan. Okay, and then after that, you have a tutoring session where there'll be a more junior uh, member of the faculty who will do a lot of exercises and activities to help a smaller group of the students, maybe 20 of the 60 students, uh, really like practically start applying some of these ideas. So I am a tutor, so I do the that second afternoon session with the students where there'll be lots of activities. I get to design what that looks like. I get to help them engage with the concepts in a more practical sense. Yeah.
Okay. Great. So, in the next thing, Kushali, what I want you to tell me is give me some incidents of what the work is like and things that have stayed with you. It could be anything. It could be an interaction that you had. It was a realization that you had about something that you worked with or people that you worked with, which suddenly sort of made one of those light bulbs go on. Because I'm not saying that these are, there are definite, I understand that it's gradual, but there's a point at which you're looking at something and then saying, yeah, like Niranjan said, that PBS was a great example that simply by ensuring that they got to know that this was available to them and being aware of that right created a difference. So, have you seen this either at that point of instructing people or at a point when you found that you were communicating or working with teams?
I think there are many such moments. I'm actually struggling to think of just one.
So that's okay. I'm not saying I understand that
So,
this is,
yeah.
I sprung that question at you, but
Hmm.
okay, but how do you, let's say, when you were making those films for, or part of that company which is making films for
Hmm.
the mass media in Africa,
Hmm.
why is it that those films weren't produced in Africa because the production quality wasn't good enough? Or is it that this is
Hmm.
how this whole thing went out?
Oh, this is like now like a whole can of worms. But so okay.
Okay.
So yeah, I
Okay.
mean what I can say is that yeah, there's often in the development sector this kind of divorce of ownership and control, and it can get quite neo-colonial in a way where there are still organizations that are, say, in the UK, but the impact is seen in 9 African countries. And often it's kind of, it is colonial in the way that the Western countries often retain the control of how some of this money is spent, even though in these African countries that we're working with, like local film industries are extremely well developed, just not well funded, and there's a lot of local talent. So actually the place that I worked at, they would engage like local screenplay writers, local voice artists, local actors. Everything was produced locally itself, and that's why it worked. It's because this, like, it wasn't this Western gaze on like how life is in Tanzania or something, it was quite locally rooted, and that's really important. But for me, this was the reason for choosing my current role now, is because I have been in organizations where you're kind of looking at it from like a top down perspective sometimes, where you are very divorced from the reality of the people that you're working for or supposedly advocating for change for. And I wanted to work closer, like, I wanted the environment around me to be where the change I am trying to influence is happening. And that's where I think I can also contribute most. So now I'm working at an organization where the impact is hyper local. We're working on hunger and food poverty in the UK, like at its worst cost of living crisis in generations, so that for me has been really fulfilling change and pivot in the way, like, you enter international development and then sometimes you end up in local development, and
So how
that
do
feels
you go
so good.
about sourcing food, which is,
Hmm.
across so many touch
Yeah.
points, so many parts of a supply chain? Is
Hmm.
there an information gathering exercise? How do you figure out where there is food available and how do you ensure that it's distributed?
Yeah, I've just joined this organization a month ago, but they're
Okay.
super inspiring. I just don't want to get any of the technicalities wrong. But how they do it is they partner with the largest food producers in the country. So they go from farms to packagers, manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers, and then supermarkets, and also restaurants. And they get kind of people from the food industry themselves to work with them to then identify where there is surplus food. And surplus food is food that didn't find a route to market for some reason, like it was after the best before date but before the use by date, So it's still good to eat, but you can't market it on shelves or for whatever reason. So supermarkets have to take that stock off, but it otherwise will be disposed of. But there is millions of people in the country who are suffering from food poverty. So it's a very easy solution. From farms, so like one example of how this is tangibly done is the supermarkets, they themselves drive up the stock to warehouses across the country. There are 34 warehouses across the country where the stock is collected from supermarkets and then distributed to charities. But from farms, which is where the most food is wasted in the entire food supply chain, um, they don't even harvest certain produce if they know they're not going to be able to sell it, because they make a loss on that harvesting time. So then my this organization I work with, Fairshare, they would then kind of pay for those extra labor of harvesting that extra produce of carrots, for example, which, and then they pay for those 2 days of harvesting and maybe packaging, and then they get it to the warehouses to then distribute.
Okay.
Hmm.
Great. So I'm speaking to Niranjan and Khushali, and in the previous segment, they were speaking about what their job actually involved and what it meant doing on a day-to-day basis. So Khushali, for example, has been working on campaigns in mass media, which is aimed at the African countries, and Niranjan has been doing research as well as teaching about very specific subjects to do with international development. Here, I think, is the interesting part that when they said international development, we think of development somehow as being building infrastructure and making larger cities. But I think it comes down to the most basic, because that's where you really have to develop, where the most basic needs in life are met. And it's inspiring to see how they've decided that this is one thing that they want to be associated with and work from. In the final segment, I'll be speaking to them about what their plans for the future are, where they see this going, and about jobs and whether people can make the most difference where they are in the country that they're living in, or should they then always see these dreams of settling abroad? Okay, so would you like to go with that, Koshali, or
No, no,
how
I'm
do
gonna
you?
pass to Niranjan first.
Okay, Niranjan, all yours.
Sorry, it's a question about the last bit about moving elsewhere. Is that the?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that, yeah. Do you think that that is one way that people can look at and then say, oh, but I need to work abroad? It could be anywhere. It could be in the UK. It could be in a developed country, to think I can make a difference. What would your advice be?
Yeah, I mean, natural reasoning would say that it should be where the problem is. And to be honest, at this point, the problem is everywhere. So, like, UK has its well fair share of problems. So
Right.
there are lots of like So no, I mean, the current thinking is that people should even within the sector, change has to happen locally. Change has to be like locally contextualized, and that's how you should kind of proceed with any kind of solution. You should like the whole idea of a best practice, a silver bullet is, uh, yeah, like people do not advocate for that at all. So, in my particular case, I was in India till 2019 or something, and then I came here for my masters, and I knew beforehand that it's really hard. So I mean, the university I teach in and I study in, it's like it's ranked number one in the world for international development. So it's very well regarded in the field. Uh, and I'd spoken to a few students, few of my friends who had kind of come to the UK and gone to the US to study, and a lot of them basically said that it's really hard to get a job if you are taking on a loan or something of that sort to kind of move to a different country with the aspiration of getting a job there, especially in this field. I i i, I was told beforehand that it's pretty hard. It's like maybe there's a chance, but the chances are very slim. Fortunately, in my case, I did get a job after like doing my masters, But that was not the case with most of the people that I knew in my class. And I had to, I tried to go back a few years and I had to see, like, who in the last 4 5 years has kind of managed to, go through this pipeline of masters in a different country in this sector and then getting a job there. And I struggled to find people. And generally, the mood globally is to kind of have tighter borders, try to reduce immigration. And yeah, I mean, if you keep up with the news, you know that there is a trend of these kinds of leaders being elected to power and they don't want anyone else coming in. They believe the solution is to rely just on the local workforce, even though data suggests that immigration is often good for the local economy. Uh, so yeah, I would definitely say that if anyone is considering doing their masters in a different country and they're taking on significant economic risks to kind of do that, to be incredibly careful about it. It's different if you have a very privileged background and you're not going to be affected, even if you know you spend a lot of money and you have to come back to India and you're not going to recover the cost, let's say. Then that's a different case. But in case you are taking on financial risks to do that, definitely speak to alumni, definitely speak to people who have already done that, who are in that country that you want to be in, and you want to like get a sense of what's the current mood and what are the current policies in place. Is the government making it harder for people to kind of join the workforce after graduating from the bachelor's or master's? So that kind of solid research is needed before you make a decision of that sort. In the UK, currently, it's pretty complicated to, um, yeah,
Get a job. Hmm.
to get a job. Just the economy is, not the best, and also the government is very keen on not getting more people to kind of stay back after studies. So that's
Okay.
my current sense. Yeah.
Okay. Kushali, anything you want to add to that, or you think?
Yeah, I just one quick thing. I totally agree with everything you said, Niranjan. One quick thing to say is also that the international development sector itself is shrinking a little bit, and that's being determined by the exact same forces that Niranjan already talked about. But more specifically, aside from immigration, also in the flow of funding. So, like, we're seeing that the largest funders of international development work around the world are totally being like cutting funding. So, the US government has cut funding, the UK government is shrinking their international aid budget. And so, funding is also becoming more localized. And the sector itself is trying to find its feet after these shocks recently. So, in terms of considering careers in this space, also look at the sustainability of some of these roles. Um, because, yeah, like really look at the funding streams of, you know, the UN, look at the funding streams of other multinational organizations, multilateral organizations, and also then local organizations are also suffering as a result. So, yeah.
Great. So let me, sort of ask you the question, which is, how do you see the future? And in terms of your own experiences, do you think that you sleep better at night thinking that you've done something that will help people along? Or is it that at the end of the day, it's like a job where it has its ups and downs, and you could have the same frustrations that an investment banker has, even though your sort of intentions are noble and you want to make change happen. So, what is the lived experience of your job, Niranjan?
I mean, I don't know what an investment banker, what their life is like. So I'm not to compare it. Maybe they don't think about
Yeah,
the world's problems, so they
yeah.
maybe sleep better. I I don't think I don't think and I sleep better because I feel like I'm doing the right thing. It's at the end, yeah. At the end, most of these um, they're all jobs, right?
Yeah.
And the people do say that you should not maybe at times convert. You should not make your hobby your job because then that becomes like you treat it as that. And there is research which now does kind of
Yeah.
validate those experiences. Uh, I don't know, in terms of the future, I do like Kush was saying, there is like the sector is changing. And to be honest, I mean, when I speak to people from other sectors, I feel like every sector is like going through a lot of changes at this moment. Of course, with AI and just changes in the way markets are being run. Uh, I'm not sure what the future really holds. And there's also a certain level of introspection that's needed in terms of what makes me happy. Is it to kind of like do like work in this area, but what if this area is not well funded anymore, and what if it's hard to get a job in this area, but but it still make me happy and whatnot. So there's a certain level of like introspection that I feel like I've been doing the last few months particularly. Things are changing, but I definitely enjoy doing research a lot. And maybe you could work in a university and you could continue doing research on things, but adapt to the present day concerns and try to you always need a hook whenever you're kind of pitching anything or you're telling
Right.
anything.
Right.
So the hook
Right.
might change, but you try to maybe do the stuff that you really care about. uh yeah, I cannot speak to the experiences of those who are investment bankers. So I don't know if they, maybe they are having a great time in life.
Yeah. Okay. Khushali, what about you? In terms of your
Yeah.
daily routine, do you think that it's fulfilling, it's satisfying?
Yeah, I think it is fulfilling to kind of work so directly on something that's affecting most of the population in the UK. And it's always nice to be able to, sometimes when someone says, "Oh, I'm a data engineer," I don't know what follow-up question to ask them because the job is so like, but if I say, "Look, I'm working on food poverty," it's easy to have like it's kind of like an everyday job or everyday
Yeah.
matter that affects a lot of us. And I think same with Niranjan's role as well. The stuff he works on affects all of us. And so in that sense, it's extremely fulfilling. But on a day-to-day basis, it does end up being like a job where you log on, you're doing what you're doing, and then you're logging off. So sometimes it's hard to see the direct impact. But in those moments, you have to remember those small incidents, which I couldn't remember earlier when you asked me. um, but the small incidents that actually remind you why you're doing what you're doing. But you do have to be strategic now because the sector is changing so much, and you can't just rely on the fact that you have good intention and good, you know, will to keep going in the sector. You do have to be quite strategic about the next steps. And sometimes change, like doing this kind of work, doesn't have to be paid. Like you can be in a high paying job in the finance sector and still be campaigning for change in your neighborhood. So that's also something else to consider.
Yeah.
Ju- can I
No,
speak?
in India, I think that's sorry. Niranjan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. Yeah,
No,
no.
please.
In terms of like actual fulfillment, there is like my job is like to do a lot of research. I can like if you enjoy going down a rabbit hole of what exactly is there's a particular problem. How are people trying to answer that problem? For example, people trying to improve access to banking services amongst poor people in different countries. How have people gone about it? How are different? What are the different approaches people have had? What's worked? What's not worked? So if you enjoy going down the rabbit hole, then research I think is a fascinating and fulfilling field to be in. So I find it personally fulfilling at that level because I'm reading about stuff that I really care about and I do want to know the answers to. Uh, yeah, so basically, yeah, if you find that kind of stuff fascinating, then research would be a very fulfilling thing. Yeah.
Okay, great. So let me ask you as we move towards closing this session as to what kind of a temperament do you think uh, works better for social work? Because there are some people, for example, who are, you know, who just want to get a job done. They are not looking at the overall impact. So it could be a part of a supply chain. So a person in logistics, for example, is actually doing quite a good job because they are moving things, though they don't see it as bringing about change. They see it as I'm moving packages. But if it's part of a supply chain that gets food to people, it's part blood to places or medical supplies to places where it's required. I'm wondering if some of these we have given it an overall, a sheath, and what is the actual, because we are saying okay, we are doing this, but then it's the day to day. If a person does a dedicated job, they are helping. Do you agree with that view or don't?
That feels like a philosophical question. um, I
It is, but
yeah.
I'm saying you people have been articulate enough, which is why I'm asking you the tough one.
Mm.
Otherwise, I would have ended this with something pretty simple.
I
Yeah,
think uh, are all jobs good for society? I don't think so. I feel like some jobs you definitely do get paid. I mean,
yeah,
there
yeah,
are tasks that you can get paid for which are harmful
yeah.
to other human beings.
Right. Very true.
Uh, so, but everyone's in. I mean, everyone's kind of contributing to the economy, but development is not just. It does not boil down to just GDP at the end, right? I mean, now the understanding has moved on to a, like development is more holistic. It's about people's well-being, mental, physical, but uh, also in terms of people having jobs. You could have GDP growth which focuses on some sectors which are maybe contributing a lot, but a lot of people are unemployed and they don't have uh, like they're
True.
not able to
No, I
do
think
it.
you answered that perfectly by saying that it's not necessary that all jobs are good for the world, because that's
Mm.
not just because some jobs are good in certain contexts, it's exactly the same way.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. It was wonderful having you on the show and getting to know what you do on a daily basis and the kind of change. Uh, may it be a lot more fulfilling in the years ahead, and may we find solutions that actually work on the ground. Thank
No.
you very much for being on the show.
Thank you so
Thanks a lot.
much.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Okay. That was Niranjan and Khushali, and I had a wonderful time talking to them because it's great to see young people who are charged about doing things that really make a difference on the ground. Next week, another guest, another career. Until then, keep watching.